Good morning, everybody. I'm Jodey Arrington. I'm from West Texas, the food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world. I'm honored to serve as budget chairman, and I can summarize the fiscal state of the nation. It's bleak, and the path forward is very, very uncertain. Nobody can look at the balance sheet of our federal government or the nonpartisan CBO's budget outlook and not shudder at the rapid deterioration of our nation's financial health. No responsible leader in this country worth their salt would, in a debt limit situation and negotiation where we look at our nation's indebtedness and its impact on the financial health of our country and our children's future, and not do something about it. What we're asking President Biden to do is to do what he did when he was vice president. Do what he did simply when he was in the Senate. Come to the table and put common sense spending controls and fiscal reforms as we raise the debt ceiling, pay our bills, and protect the good faith and credit of the United States. Folks in West Texas, and I imagine across the country, see that as pretty straightforward, especially, Madam Chair, as they suffer under the effects of the $10 trillion in spending over the last 2 years, $6 trillion added to the national debt, record inflation, soaring interest rates, and a nosedive into recession. That is the reality of the rest of America. And so they're tightening their belts and they're changing their spending habits. And by God, the people in this town who represent this great nation, who are responsible for funding this government, need to do the same. I was at the Rules Committee hearing last night, 6 hours, required all the stamina I could muster and patience. But I think there are a few things that are noteworthy that I would like to share with you. Number one, I didn't hear any of my Democrat colleagues challenging or pushing back on the substance of our debt ceiling proposal. I think it's that straightforward. I think it's that common sense to right-size the bureaucracy coming out of COVID. Go back to 4 months ago where we were spending just 4 months ago. Obama's last year of his budget had us spending at that level. So I think there's consensus that that is extremely reasonable. And then you got the list of reversing some of the reckless spending items like the student loan cancellation, the army of IRS agents and the like. But I didn't get any pushback last night substantively on what we have been presenting. Secondly, I didn't hear a single Democrat offer up in 6 hours an alternative item of savings. We're at $1.5 trillion in annual deficits today. That's what we're borrowing. We'll be at $3 trillion in 10 years. We're at $500 billion in interest payments. We'll triple that in 10 years and be paying $1.5 trillion. And not one time in 6 hours of this conversation about how we right size, how we get on the right track that is sustainable and responsible, and not one alternative. Just a bunch of boogeymen, just a bunch of phantom funding cuts that they rolled out there. It was sad because it was a party that's lost its way, that has lurched so far to the left, they can't even come back to the common sense Clinton era work requirements for able-bodied adults. I saw them have a death grip on the blank check and the status quo, and they will lose that fight. They will lose that fight with the American people. It's not about me. It's not about these guys. It's about the American people. Lastly, this one, I get emotional about it. So, but because it's real. This is real. The most vulnerable group in America, in my mind, and there are lots of vulnerable groups, and we have to be responsible. And we have to prioritize. That's what this is about, prioritizing. But it's also about protecting the future as we prioritize and our children's future. I think the most vulnerable group in America are the children that have no place in this town, no lobbyists to speak of that I know of, no seat around the table, it feels like, and they're going to inherit $31 trillion in debt and counting. Who's going to speak up for them? This is what they will inherit, and somebody's got to speak up. But in 6 hours, and I close with this, in 6 hours, and you'll never invite me back to another one of these press hearings, but in 6 hours, I heard a lot of stakeholders in government programs and government funding. I heard a lot of groups and communities. I never once, and I said this at the hearing, if you listen to the 6 hour tape, not one time did my Democrat colleagues mention the children and grandchildren of the people here, the future generation of Americans who will inherit the whirlwind because of the seeds that were sown of reckless spending and an insatiable appetite to spend this country into bankruptcy. So I'm going to support this Limit, Save, Grow, obviously, and it's a responsible thing to do. It's the right thing to do, and I pray to God that we'll get our president, respecting him in the office, to come to the table and be a leader worthy of the citizens of the United States of America.